Peaceful Scotland was the unlikely place where an impassioned debate over Singapore's name erupted in 1939. It happened after a local listener of the BBC criticised the public broadcaster for how during the past 6 months, the name of Singapore had very frequently been wrongly pronounced. Writing to the Glasgow Herald, the critic claimed that the name of the then British colony should be pronounced, not as Singapore, in the BBC fashion, but as Singa-pore. Another reader of the newspaper then defended the BBC, by pointing out that the name Singapore is derived from Singa-pura in Malay, meaning city of the lion, and the word Singa for lion is pronounced Singa. The lion was already the official symbol of Singapore, but this did not end the dispute. Like fire, the argument spread to the Southeast Asian city, where the Straits Times newspaper received a flood of readers' letters, each offering a different opinion on the matter. Amongst them was a Malay, who vouched that he and his people always pronounced Singapore's native name as Singa-pura, according to the way Singa, the word for lion, is read, and not Singa-pura. However, the other letters gave every other imaginable explanation for the origin and pronunciation of the country's name. Not every one of them connected the name to the lion. Some even affirmed its pronunciation as Singa-pura. In particular, a prominent third-generation settler, Roland Braddell, laid out that the pronunciation of Singapore ever since the British came had been Singa-pore. Citing his maternal grandfather who sailed here on an East Indiaman in the 1830s as an example, he revealed that British seamen in the very early days called the place Sing-ga-pore, or for the very illiterate, Sing-ga-pore. The lawyer and historian also contradicted the Malay contributor, by asserting the Malays pronounce the place as we do, Singapore, or Singa-pura. With this, he concluded,
"It is not a question of how the name ought to be pronounced theoretically, but how it is pronounced.
Don't we all know Singapore is Singa-pura, the lion city? Why did some people insist it is Singa-pura?" Singapore's famous association with the Felis Leo is traced to the Sejarah Melayu and its tale of how the island was known as Temasek, until a Palembang prince Sang Nila Utama spotted a lion-like beast here, and he took it as an auspicious sign to found a settlement that was named Singa-pura, the Lion City. This story is today taught in school to all children in Singapore as part of the country's history. Yet, it was somewhat of a novelty when the Straits Times republished a narration of it from the Sarawak Gazette in 1874, with the Singapore paper's editor observing,
"We Singaporeans have been so long accustomed to believe the Malay name of this port to mean simply a port of call, from the commonly accepted definition of the meaning of its component parts."
These component parts were subsequently identified in a letter from T.H. Crane, whose father was one of Singapore's longest residing merchants in the 19th century, after he settled here in 1825. According to him, Singapore's name is made up of two Malay words, Singa, which means to call at, or to land at, and pura, a mark of composition with no distinct meaning in itself. Together Singa-pura means a place of call or landing. Given the fundamental importance of trade to Singapore's survival and fortune, Singapore being known as a place of call sounds not only reasonable but also perfectly logical. As for the Lion City explanation, the Singapore-born man dismissed it by highlighting that Singa, the word for lion, is pronounced differently from Singa, with the G soft, as in the English word singer. Just as things unfolded 6 decades later, Crane's view was countered by a contributor to the Samarang Current in Java, who stressed that Singapore's name was clearly written in the old Sejarah Melayu manuscripts as Singa, and not Singa. Nevertheless, the writer conceded that many Europeans sounded the G in Singapore separately, like the English G in garden. This resulted in Sing-ga-pore being heard, and some natives followed them in this. The correct pronunciation of Singapore's name continued to be disputed through the years. Despite the Sejarah Melayu's authority as a venerated Malay text, the popular usage of Singa-pura or Singapore was affirmed by this comment from the editor of the Singapore Free Press in 1921.
The generally accepted derivation gives the origin as Singa, a calling place, and pura, the equivalent of the Indian pure, or pur, the ending of so many places in India, a town, or city. The city of calling.
The editor's remark was prompted by a letter from an old resident, who had written to express his bemusement that
any credit should be allowed to the name having been derived from the word Singa, a lion, as it is well known that such an animal has never existed as a part of the natural fauna of Malaya.
Indeed, it is plain to see that the Sejarah Melayu's author had no idea what a lion looks like, from his description of the creature Sang Nila Utama encountered as having a red body, black head, white breast, and was a little larger than a he-goat. The belief that Singapore meant a port of call in Malay was reiterated at the height of the exchanges of letters in the press in 1939 by another resident, who even insinuated that only the ignorant think it is the city of the lion. Could Singapore really be Singa-pura, the port of call, and not Singa-pura, the lion city? Are the voices from the past telling us something we do not know?